Amar Chada-Patel, welcome to An Actor Despairs. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's great to have you here, man. You got an incredible look, but I know you had a really bad night with some laptop issues. So I really appreciate you being here, despite the stress of I know the peril of laptop,
Issue,
technology issues well.
singular issue, and I feel like the issue was less with the laptop and more with me and my relation to baths and my connection. Yeah, it was bound to happen. I'm very laissez-faire with my laptop in a bath scenario. So who doesn't
Well,
want to watch movies in the bath, right?
I totally agree, and maybe iPhones because I think they're water resistant now. But we're here to talk about you and your wonderful work, man. And I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you. You've
Oh, thank
carved
you.
out a really awesome path, and you have some incredible projects coming out. True Love. I love Gareth Edwards, man. He's a great director, so I'm really excited to see you in that. I got some friends. You know Mark Menchaca?
Mark, yeah, of course. What a legend.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had a great time.
yeah,
Uh,
he's the man.
yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, he's great in that movie, and we had some cool scenes together. And it was just a crazy job, man. We were like, the whole thing is set in a sort of future dystopia, technological, but for the most part, it was all shot in Thailand. So we were just out there for like I was out there for like almost 3.5 months.
Wow.
Even though I'm not that big a part of the movie, I have quite a sort of like strange presence within it. I won't give too much away, but I have a strange presence within the movie, and it involves me working with a lot of the other actors, and so other people's schedules would be like, a few weeks here, a few weeks there. But for me, it was just like you're there the whole time, and you will come in when other people come in. Um,
Wow.
so I had this like weird world where people would sort of dip in and out, and then I would go away for a week or two, and then come back, and there'd be a whole bunch of new actors. I'm like, who are you guys? Like the new year at school, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. But Mark's
Fascinating.
great. We were shooting up north, and we bonded over Negronis, classic drink.
I love it, man. That's beautiful. Well, but before we dig into work, let's start at the very beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in like in between East London and North London, largely. But I had family in West London, which is like a quite a large sort of Indian immigrant area. Um, so yeah, sort of a multi London geographical upbringing, the
And
best of all the multicultural worlds.
because you were moving around a lot, or you had parents that lived in different
Yeah,
places?
partly because my dad lived in Hackney, my mum lived in North London for a bit, and we moved around a bit, and then I would stay with my grandparents, and it was quite a unique upbringing because London is so big and so vast and so
Yeah.
multicultural, especially areas where I was sort of north and east. There's like I think I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I read that one of the areas where I live is called Stoke Newington, and the square mile area of Stoke Newington is apparently like the most culturally diverse square mile in all of Europe because it
Wow.
has like a huge Turkish community, a huge Bengali Indian community, huge Afro Caribbean community. There's like all these different immigrant communities from North London have all coalesced in this one area. So having that, and then also being able to go to West London, where my grandparents were, where there was a very big Indian connection, um, and then East London, which is like a very strong Black cultural area as well. Sort of had like a mad mix of everything.
Wow. So you got London in your blood, man. That's so
Pretty
beautiful.
much.
And talk to me then, what are your parents artists?
No, not really. I mean, my dad can draw, and I think he wishes he'd done more of that. But he works in academia now, or he's retired. But yeah, he was a social worker for a long time, and then
Wow.
ended up becoming a chief executive of a social worker of a social work company, sort of like a privatized social work company when the government was outsourcing in the sort of 90s, and then moved into academia and became a professor and teaching diversity and management diversity within structured organizations. And my mother was also a social worker, but then in her life has been a poet and a writer and an artist in her own right. Um, but yeah, there is sort of a mix of stuff there in the family.
That's so beautiful. And then talk to me then, where did the artistic inclination start to happen, with your mother writing? Like, was she exposing you to literary materials at a young age or?
Yeah, I mean, well, both my parents and my stepmother as well, who's also responsible for helping bring me up. Like my family has a deep love and connection to art, music and film, and I was always brought up to, to appreciate that. And my dad was a big rocker, huge fan of the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Supertramp, like 70s era rock and roll, Zeppelin. And my mum was more sort of Bob Marley and a bit more Motown, as was my stepmom. Bits of jazz, but with sort of modern pop music. Like I was always exposed to great music as a child, but then also quite a big love of world music from both of them. My dad's a huge fan of African guitar music and North African music and South African music and then Indian classical music as well. And there's, I had a very rich childhood when it came to like appreciating different music and art out there. And in terms of film, I guess the thing is there's a big immigrant community of Indians in the UK, and largely the sort of Punjabi side of it, which is North Indian, which used to be all of the Punjab, now is half Punjab, half Pakistan. Those two sort of parts of India, a lot of those people that came post-colonialization and settled in the UK are in the West. Rich history there. And then my dad's family were East African Indians from Uganda who came over when Idi Amin exiled exiled the Indians from Africa in the 70s. And so he came and he settled in the East because there was a big community there. Wow. And so they sort of came to this country young, and there is a big sort of move to assimilate, and become part of that country when you move in. And so my dad, I think, was just willing to expose himself to all these new cultural sort of markers and zeitgeisty things that were happening in the 70s in the UK, and same with my mum. But I also had this tie to the West and the East. It's parts of the city where these strong Indian cultures were. So I think with that lens of wanting to just experience lots of things as the first generation Brit born here for them, I just was exposed to all these things that were exciting to them.
Yeah.
So in terms of film, there's a huge love of cinema in my family, blockbusters to art house films to Indian films to world cinema as well. So yeah, I was blessed to like be exposed to a lot of different cultural standpoints and markers in history by my family. And then my auntie is a director as well, and she'd made a film in the 90s that I was in when I was 4 years old. So it was my first role.
No way.
Yeah, she's a very successful filmmaker. Her name's Chadha, and she directed Bender Like Beckham. And
oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And so that was my first exposure to film. I was 4, and then there was an opportunity to be a child actor, but I sort of didn't want to do it. I think at that age, I told my parents, I was like, "Nah, I'm just going to go back to school, see my friends."
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I had decided that I loved being creative. I was always a maker. I loved to make things, toys and models and Legos, and I was very creatively minded when it came to building. I'm sort of a more a lateral thinker than a logical thinker in the sense that I like problem solving and using my hands. And so I decided that I wanted to be in the industry, but I wanted to be a designer of some sort.
Like stage design or?
Yeah. So I actually studied production design as a undergrad, and that was what I graduated in. So through my aunt, I had been exposed from a young age to the film industry. And I never really, I worked with her a little bit, in the art department, if she ever had a film going and I had trained as a production designer, I would sort of work alongside her as in the art department and learn my way around a film set through those qualifications. But I never really worked with her. We have different approaches to film. It's funny that having people in the industry, of course, can help you get work, but someone like a director there's only 1 or 2 of those jobs around. And then other jobs on the film set, there's singular departments of 1 person. There's not really space for more than 2. So
totally,
it's great exposure to that world, but we didn't really work too much together. And so I found my path to acting sort of by myself, by accident, really. I'd always been a bit of a performer.
We're talking post-grad here?
Yeah, so post-grad,
Okay.
I sort of became a production designer for a bit. Mostly like art directing, did lots of music videos and commercials.
Anything you can name drop that people could check out?
I don't think anyone would care. I'm talking like, I never became a full-fledged production designer. I did 1 or 2 like indie short films and things.
Okay, cool.
I was working on like Activia commercials and
all right.
working on like big budget commercials as an art department person, but it was lots of prop sourcing and sometimes making. And but when I graduated, I was like, I'm gonna build pirate ships. I want to make the Goonies. That's what was in my head. That's the dream. But that is such a small. It's a hard world to get into, and in the UK, especially, the film industry in the sort of early noughties wasn't huge. There wasn't a huge amount getting made, and there's only ever going to be like 10 production designers, and you can get into those departments. But very quickly, I just realized like this is probably not the path for me. I'm good, but I'm not incredible, and I'm not going to excel at this. So I sort of reset myself. I started making films. I was like, I can still make though, and become a director. So I started editing films and making music videos for people from a more sort of umbrella director point of view.
Yeah.
Ended up making a few music videos. A friend of mine said I was a really good editor because I'd edited something together. And I think probably because I was also a musician as well, and I had an idea of meter and timing, that editing felt relatively instinctive to me.
Final Cut days or
Yeah, oh yeah, Final
yeah,
Cut.
yeah.
Final Cut 07.
Oh, the best, man.
Old school,
God,
yeah.
hate that they killed that program. It was so good.
It's tragic. I used
Yeah.
it way too late after it was phased out. When
I
everyone,
still don't know how to use Premiere the right way, man. You know, it's so hard to switch over.
I had to force myself to use Premiere professionally because it just made sense. Because
Yeah.
everything, but in my heart of hearts, I was like, "Where's that Final Cut Pro disc?"
I know, man. I miss it so much. Yeah, I'm so glad you feel the same.
Relearning all those shortcuts, like
Oh, the hotkeys are critical.
yeah, like
Yeah.
C cut, that's obvious, and then in
Yeah.
Premiere, B for blade, you're like, what? No one says blade. A lot of people
I
say
know.
blade, but not when you're editing. Yeah, no, that was a that's a lauded and sacred piece of software to me. So yeah, I taught myself to edit, and then I picked up some cameras, and then I ended up editing these films for this clothes fashion company called All Saints. I think you have.
I love All Saints. Yeah, they're great.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually worked for All Saints for like 3 years, I became the kind of de facto head of video in All Saints.
Wow. And they're
yeah.
a big company, so you must have been doing pretty well.
Yeah, it was strange, man. It was a fun time. It was like the birth of digital content on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
What we were doing is, my friend who worked there at the time was the head of music, and fashion houses didn't really have heads of music, but they were finding as a brand that they were doing so much crossover with fashion shows and events, and getting artists to be heroes in campaigns. So they needed someone who understood the music industry. So Tom Hutt, who worked there, he was their head of music, and he had this idea of being like, well, let me use my connections in the industry to just bring in bands. We'll give them a ton of free clothes, and then we'll shoot music sessions of them, and then we'll put them on YouTube. And this is in like 2011, when no one was doing. I think
yeah.
Red Bull Academy was doing it, and Burberry was doing this thing called Burberry Acoustic, where they had like one person with a guitar and they would film it.
Totally.
No one else was doing full band sessions, so I was cutting those. And then I came in one day and was like, "Oh, you're just using 2 cameras. If you get 3 or 4 more, we can make it super dynamic." And then by a year later, we were just shooting these like insane, like 6-7 camera live sessions with George Harrison's son, Danny Harrison, has a band called the New Number Two. We did them. We did like Foster the People, all these huge bands from like 2000.
Wow, yeah.
Gary Newman came in, did an amazing thing with Gary Newman. Did this crazy session with Flume. It was fun. It was crazy.
Bands that are crushing it now. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, these are all up and coming people that knew the industry, and we were like, "Here's free clothes. You come in. You do what you do best. We'll film it. We'll cut it. It goes on YouTube, and this is the new world of content." And it made sense. And so I was just shooting and learning how to shoot on like small scales, on bigger scales for like 3 years. And by 2014, I was a director, and I
You
left.
feel like that was your film school? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Yeah.
That was like a trial by fire, because I knew how to use a camera. I taught myself how to use a camera, but it was this weird. I mean, it's in 30 years' time, we'll look back on this like period of 2 years where they invented the sort of the Canon 5D,
The DSLR,
DSLR camera.
Totally.
And suddenly you had this camera that had these lenses that could create soft focus and depth and all these cinematic things. And if you hit a button, it would shoot high quality footage for like 10 minutes. And suddenly a film was like, well, I just need this camera.
Yeah, I know. The 5D Mark III, that was the one. Everyone had it.
It changed the world. So I was right there at the birth of that, and I was able to just and these cameras were largely photography cameras, and so All Saints had like 10 of them in their studio. They were just shooting.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. Wow.
And so I was like, let's grab a couple of them and shoot this, and then we'd take models out on the street and shoot lookbooks. And then suddenly I was getting more creative. I remember one of the head of Wimswear at the time had come up to me and said, "Oh, we've got some new jewelry coming out. Should we make a film?" I was like, "Yes." So we hired like a Phantom camera, which shot like
slow-mo camera.
Yeah, like 2,000 frames a second, and this jewelry was like giant crystals and stuff, and we just put it on black perspex and then dumped water on it and shot it in slow motion. It was just like these explosive. It was
And
just
it
like a
looks
nice.
so epic. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
I was getting to experiment and be conceptual with ideas, and I had like this wealth of resources. You know, I had subjects like models and clothes, and then I had equipment, and I had freedom to turn things into, you know, interesting visuals, and it was just a real baptism of fire in terms of how to craft a film. And then I was cutting it all, so I just became this sort of like self-made filmmaker. And then I left All Saints, signed with a production company in East London called Agile, became one of their directors, and then started doing big high level commercials. And by sort of 2015 was directing like L'Oreal commercials.
Wow.
You're not telling anyone because that stuff is great and you earn a lot of money, but it's not really your creative work. You know, you want to make other stuff. I wanted to make
Yeah.
short films and it's a poison chalice really because it's like you get paid a bunch of money to do this commercial and then you're like, cool, I'll just take some of that and I'll make a short film and then I'll do another one. But actually, you have to hustle to get another
You're
commercial.
so busy. Yeah. In the
Mm.
grind. I get it. Yeah.
And again, I got to this point where I was like, I was good at it, but I wasn't incredible, and I never really loved fashion that much to like be dedicated enough to be good at it as a director. I was getting more and more interested in long form stuff or like surreal comedy, and I couldn't sort of slide into that lane because my reel was high end fashion, and you know I
Yeah.
got quite well known for doing these dance films. So I did like for the Couples. I worked for the Couples for 3 years, which is like a sort of upmarket high street.
Yeah.
You
Love
know,
Kooples. Yeah.
yeah, I directed all of their campaigns for like 3 years, and they were cool
Dude,
conceptual.
you're like Kubrick here. You're trying to make it sound like you're some like you're crushing it with the biggest brands, man. You were doing so well.
Yeah, I was, but in my heart of hearts, it was like, I'm good at this, but I'm not incredible. And alongside that, I was immersed in film. So I'd always make stupid, like, short films with friends and like comedy sketches. And I lived in this warehouse in East London with like five other creative people, and we would put on nights and perform. And we were just immersing ourselves in our creative energy and ability. And I liked performing. And then I had this band, and in 2015, 16, I had this band, and we released a cover of "Don't Let Go" by En Vogue.
Yeah.
Um, you know, what's it gonna be?
Yeah.
Yeah, we released that, and it went on like TV, and it was on a show, and it charted us for a little bit, and then the band got like a little bit successful, and then we started getting booked, and it was a fun party band, and so I started doing festivals, you know, like Glastonbury, and you know, all the best of all these big festivals in the UK and some in Europe with my buddies, my two best friends, and we would just I was shooting films and commercials and making money, and then I'd take weekends off and drive to festivals and play to like 3,000 people, and it'd be people that never really heard our band, and it's a
What was the
festival.
band's name called? Because I'm
It's
gonna look
called
it.
Strong Asian Mothers.
Strong Asian Mothers. I wish I unless you approve it, maybe I'll try to sing some music here.
It's all on Spotify,
Yeah.
man. It's
Yeah.
all, you have my permission. I don't know about
Yeah.
the guys, but I don't think they'll care. But yeah, you know, suddenly we had this thing, and I was suddenly in this situation where I was like turning up to festivals, going on stage and performing. And I'd been in bands for my whole life, but it was like guitar bands. And there's a very specific way of performing with a guitar band. You know, it's mysterious. You don't have to engage. People are there for the music and the sound. But with Strong Asian Mothers, we were making this big alternative, like exciting pop music that was like party music. And you can't just end a song and go quiet. You have to talk and keep the audience invigorated and make it like an exciting state, a bit like the Flaming Lips. It's like this big spectacle, right? And that gets your band noticed, and it gets people caring about your music. So my friend, my best friend, who's now also a solo artist in LA, but he and myself were the two lead singers, sort of like frontmen of this band. We found ourselves doing this like live show that was huge, bombastic music, and then some kind of part stand up where we would just like randomly talk to people and improv stuff. And again, I was like on stage in front of thousands of people that I didn't know, having to learn how to perform and refine comic timing and be engaging without any filter or editing, because it was just that was it. And it was
Yeah.
kind of a bit like theater in a way. So all these things have been coalescing, and all I needed was someone to notice me. Not that I wanted to be noticed. All I mean is that, you know, like a friend of mine was working with a casting director who said, you know, comedians audition for this advert, and I started friends of mine who were directors started putting me in adverts that they were making because they were like, you've got a good face and you can roughly do timing. Be in my advert, it's easier than doing a casting. I did like 4 or 5 commercials. I did this one Pringles commercial for the
Yeah.
World Cup in like 2014, and it was a huge buyout. And I was like, wow, there's good money in this. And it's way easier than directing. And then I got there and I shot this commercial, and the director was Larry Charles.
No way.
Yeah, who used to write Seinfeld and directed Borat. Incredible filmmaker.
Yeah.
We got on like a house on fire. I was like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Oh, this is what I do to make money." I was like, "Oh, shit! If you're my competition as a commercial director, I'm screwed." You're a legend, and I'm still doing L'Oreal things. So again, I was reassessing myself, and he said, "Oh, we'll work together again. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "Cool." And then I went home and got on with my life. And then a year later, he emailed me and said, "I'm making this movie with Nicolas Cage. Do you want to be in it?"
What a bro. He
Yeah, what
really
a
meant
legend.
it.
Yeah, well, he actually sent me an email that said, "Hey, A, it's L. Been thinking about you recently. Making a movie with Nicolas Cage. Do you want to be in it? Are you free?" And I couldn't really believe it. But me being me, I replied to him with the Face Off poster, but I photoshopped my face over John Travolta and scribbled two, and then just sent back, "Yeah, I'm free."
Yeah.
And then
Amazing.
he didn't reply for like 3 days. I was like, "Oh, I've ruined my life." And then he came back and was like, "Ha, ha, cool. All right, this is the details." I was like, "Wait, no audition, nothing." And he was basically making this movie that sadly didn't do well because he was actually muscled out of the editing process by the Weinsteins,
Oh
who were
God. Fuck
taking
them.
control of, yeah, they were taking control of their
Can
Oscar
you say
pool.
what the movie is or
Yeah,
was
it
or
came out. It came out. It's kind of fun. It's called Army of One, and it's about this guy who had a kid. He's a real guy. His name's Gary Faulkner, and he had this liver failure induced uh, episode where he passed out and in his head saw God, and God told him to go and hunt down and capture Bin Laden and bring Bin Laden back uh,
wow.
for justice in the States. And this guy went like full gung ho, like mercenary, and started trying to find Bin Laden by flying to Pakistan and took like a samurai sword with him, like an absolutely crazy, amazing guy. And then he eventually caused so much of a fuss that the CIA, who were operating in Pakistan at the time, I think they took his passport. They found him, took his passport, tore up, and said, "Go home, stop it." And on his last trip back, his girlfriend at the time had somehow convinced Letterman to have him on. So he went straight onto Letterman and did this crazy interview, and and then GQ wrote this big piece about him, and so the filmmakers bought the rights to that, and so they wrote this
Oh,
crazy script about this guy, and Nick Cage played this guy, and I played Osama bin Laden in his head because he never met him. So he has this
yeah.
in his head. He has God, who is Russell Brand, and Osama bin Laden, who is this kind of caricatured villain version of bin Laden who he wants to conquer. And we shot loads of stuff. Not a huge amount of it made it. It ends with like a sort of weird samurai sword fight duologue in this
So
cave.
it's a comedy though.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
Okay,
I
yeah,
mean, the
yeah.
reality is that, and this is a classic thing with Larry and a lot of satirical comedic directors, is the butt of the joke was America and America's desire to be involved in foreign affairs.
Exactly.
And I think that's what Nick was challenging, channeling. He was like, I'm just gonna get involved with this shit because I can fix it, and I'm fucking
Yeah.
American. So it was a satirical film, and I think the Weinsteins or the powers that be just decided, nah,
They
it's
didn't
too.
get it.
They were like, it's too provocative. We've got other stuff coming up. They re-edited it. They muscled Larry out. He was really upset. They got rid of his editor. They recut the whole film to be this weird sort
Oh
of.
God.
So it was weird. So I'd gone from like being not an actor to suddenly being an actor and being in this movie. And I remember sitting on set on this one day, and it was like me opposite Nick doing this thing. And I was like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
But I was not phased. I was like, I can perform. I just have to get over the fact that I'm doing it in front of people I've never met before, and there are high stakes. But I can just push all that out, and I can do it because that's really all I'm here for. But I knew what lens sizes were. I knew what the directors were doing. I knew what a mark was. I knew the technicality of a film set because I've been doing it for years. I was like, this is easy. The hard part is doing it in front of people.
Yeah.
So I went with it, and yeah. And then after that, I got an agent, and
Wait, I gotta ask, how's working with Nick Cage, man? I mean, how many
amazing.
people get to say, my first job was with Nick Cage?
Yeah, not many. Great. I loved him. He was amazing. He was dedicated. He is hilarious. He's
Yeah.
so much fun to be around. There's a hilarious scene that never made it to the film, but it's like there's this whole like progressive montage of where he passes out in the desert. He wakes up and he and I in a samurai sword fight in a cave, and he bests me, and then he's like, "I got you, Benny boy," and then he marches me out of the cave down this village. And he just keeps changing costume, and they get more and more ridiculous. And he's like, first he's wearing this like Tibetan crown, and then he and then he's like wearing this suit and he's marching me through the village. He's like throwing rose petals on me. It was absolutely crazy shoot day down the busiest street of Marrakesh, and then it ends with him taking me on the plane. And the last scene before he wakes up is him flying me to home. And the thing about Bin Laden is like a comic book villain in this. He's not
Yeah.
really. He doesn't know what he wants. He's like, he's supposed to be this terrifying fanatic Muslim terrorist, but he's also a bit of a performer, and he loves Seinfeld. He loves he loves Jewish comedy, which is
That is so funny. I gotta watch this.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think any of that made the cut, but
Oh no, man.
yeah, but the last scene is sort of like montage, and it's just me sat on the plane handcuffed next to Nick, and I'm watching Seinfeld on my iPad, and I'm just giggling, and that's the end of the montage. And Nick's asleep on my shoulder. So I turn up to this scene, and they've been waiting like 45 minutes to shoot on me because I had to have a beard attached. Because before that, I was playing like a shoe bomber because he keeps seeing Nick everywhere.
Got it. Okay.
So I was playing a shoe bomber on the plane that he tackles. It was me without beard because he thinks he's seen Bin Laden, and then so everyone's waiting for me. So I walk in and sit down in front of a full ready set, which is also rare. You get to go there and warm up and block it out, but they were like, "We're waiting, let's just block it." I walk in, they're like, "Sit down. This is what you're doing. Action!" And I'm like, I'm just laughing. He's like, "Yeah, you're just giggling at the iPad." So I'm looking at this iPad. It's off. It's black. They're going to put something in post. So I'm looking at myself in this black mirror, dressed as Bin Laden, giggling, and Nick is asleep on my shoulder. And every time I giggle, his face jiggles, and then he starts giggling, and then Larry starts giggling, and then everyone's just giggling whilst because it's the most ridiculous thing. I'm just like, like it's just that, and no one yells cut, and we're doing that for like a solid minute, and then Larry's like, "All right, that's a wrap. Let's go." I'm like, "Really? Yeah, okay." How have I ended up here? But yeah, Nick was amazing. It was a great sport. We had a lot of fun on set. He had a much harder job than me. He was doing way more scenes, but it was fun.
And do you feel? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What
I was just going to say it was really, really surreal.
Yeah.
It was a strange year.
And do you feel like that, having that incredible experience is what catapulted you into like, I want to be acting? Like, is that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say catapulted. I would say like a snail's crawl up a hill, but
Okay.
with the same momentum sort of in my mind. But it was really just like, I can do this. I've proven that I am castable to high-level Hollywood productions. I've seen myself work and don't think I'm terrible. Why would I want to do this rather than can I do it? And so I started reassessing if I wanted to be an actor. Obviously, I went back to directing because that was how I made money. But I had this privileged position of being able to make money being a director, which is incredibly lucky. And then if auditions came in, I would just say yes or no to whatever was the most interesting to me. And that's a very rare privilege to be afforded as an actor. So I was at home just an audition would come in. I'd be like, it feels a bit tropish as an Indian person. This is a time in the industry where
before representation was.
People were starting to want to diversify their productions and see more interesting faces. And I was like, I could exploit a niche here where, I'm not a young, fresh face out of drama school. I'm never going to be a sexy lead, like a 20-year-old lead. I'm 28, 29 by this point. But if someone wants a character actor, which is what I always wanted to be, if someone wants a strange looking character actor in their film and they don't want that person to be a white face, then I could be a viable alternative. And there really aren't that many South Asian men doing it. Still if I counted, I could probably name like 10 to 15 names that are well enough. So I was like, and I happened to be tall and broad, and it was.
And you're a good looking guy. Come on, man. Don't be so. Yeah.
That's subjective.
Yeah.
My mother agrees. But yeah, it was more that like this is a new face, and I think it was interesting. And then a notable thing was there was this HBO show called The Third Day, and it was like a weird folk horror thriller thing set on this island in the UK, and Jude Law was the lead, Catherine Waterston and Naomi Watts, like a great cast of amazing actors, and they needed this character who was like a demented preacher, and it read on the script, it leaps off the page as like Baptist Southern American preacher, and I was like, I could probably do that. So I shot this mad tape of me dressed like a priest out on the beach in front of a cliff, and the audition tape was this page-long sermon, and I just went full like performative preacher with it.
Yeah.
you know, in an American accent. And I had this big beard and hair and stuff, and sent it in, and they were like, "We love it." And there was a little bit of workshopping with the accent and there's a few other things, but it wasn't a huge part of the show. But I always felt like if you're a really good character actor, then ultimately you're invisible. It's the thing about acting is like people think the job is the glamorous bit. People think the job
No.
is the carpet, or it's the interviews, or where
Yeah. That's
people
all the
talk about
bullshit.
you.
Yeah.
And largely, the job is you on set, waiting to do your thing. You do it. It's you get treated like an actor, which I have my own reservations about. But ultimately, you're part of a machine with another 150 to 200 people on a big
Totally.
production. If you all do your job well, you work. You end up with a great product. But no one is more special than anybody else. As much as that happens, you want to fight that, and so it's not a very glamorous job. And so there are hundreds of thousands of incredible actors out there that are character actors that do supporting roles or small roles, and they're known, but they're kind of a bit invisible because they step in, they nail it, and they disappear, and they do
Yeah.
something else. And that's what I thought I could offer the world. So
Same. That's what I'm trying to do. I totally identified.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking for. And then I just decided that that was going to be my thing. I was going to only take roles that were interesting to me and felt like they had never been done by a South Asian person before. And so for the first 3 or 4 years, I worked maybe like 3 or 4 times over 3 or 4 years because nothing was interesting to me. And then as I got more and more known by casting directors, um, it started to grow and evolve, and then it led me to this, and now I'm at a point. There's a notable jump where you end up, if you do something where you are a lead character and you're essential to a plot, then the eyes are all on you outside for the marketing and the other elements of pushing that show forward, and it really knocks you up to a different sort of stratosphere of having to approach the job because
You got to sell the movie and talk about
yeah,
the project. Yeah.
you stop
Yeah.
being an actor just on set. You're still a performer elsewhere in your life, and it's an interesting thing. And I never ever thought of it existing for me. I never saw this in my future. I was just like, I'm going to do stuff that never been done before because if I can do that, then I'll open the door to other people. And like I've said this before, I think me playing Borman and Willow is a huge leap forward for diversity. I think it's the first time a South Asian man has done like the rogue with a heart of gold character.
Yeah.
The Han Solo, Jack Sparrow thing, like
Totally.
in global Western cinema, like on TV. It's a pretty new thing. But a large part of me believes that it was only really made possible because Dev Patel did Green Knight, and he made an South Asian man with a sword possible.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't really appreciate this, but it's amazing. And this goes back to my days of directing. Like I would come up with ideas for commercials or be asked to pitch on stuff, and I would be asked constantly for references. And it's kind of like if you can find a reference, an ideal perfect reference for what you're trying to achieve, then you have proven that what you're trying to achieve has already been done.
Yeah.
And that's fine for the most part. But like if I pitch an idea for a commercial and they're like, "Got reference," I'm like, well, if I do, then it means it's been done before and it's not unique, and you need this to be unique. But it is so interesting how many gatekeepers in the industry require that proof that it can be done to know that they can do it again. So, what David Lowery did and Dev Patel did with The Green Knight was groundbreaking for me. Like, I've always loved Arthurian legends in the UK. I've always loved England's connection to pagan history. I like pagan history, and folklore is interesting in any country. So when I saw this trailer and I see Dev Patel on this stone chair and his head turns into fire and this crown, and then you got Sean Harris and his crazy Sean Harris voice, like, tell me a tale, like just the creme de la creme of like A24 character actors. I'm like, this is so up my street, I can't breathe. And then I see Dev doing it with the sword, and I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
what the hell has happened here? This is like the dream intersection of everything I love. And so they really broke new ground with that. Regardless of how you feel about the film, like I think it's an amazing achievement. And all it meant is that the next time someone had to be like, oh, and then this guy with the sword is going to be this guy, and it's South Asian, it means that the world is like, is that weird? No, not really. It's been done before. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen it. I'm not adverse to it. And I think those cultural changes and markers are huge. They have a huge impact in like our collective appreciation of media. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do in my career, is like just look out for things that I feel like if I get to do it, it feels so different and new for a South Asian man that hopefully that opens the door for anyone else trying to do it. And we can bring that up, and that's really where I'm, what.
Well, you're certainly
Oh,
doing it and an amazing job at it. In Willow, you're so funny and you're able to carry the badass action and to find that perfect blend. I'm curious, just because I have a lot of British actors on the show,
mm,
and I'm not going to name any, but obviously we know that in the UK there are a lot of these kids that have been bred that go to prep schools. That are the best in the world, and then go to the best drama schools, and then it can be really hard in the UK for actors that don't go
mm.
to a RADA or an Old Vic to just get an audition. Do you feel like you ever encountered that, or because you had that survival job, you were able to not be phased by that part?
I'm sure I make a lot of people very angry. There are
No,
probably
not at,
no. Well, there are probably 100,000 other men out there that could have done what I did with Borman, and or done something similar or different or happens that it's. I don't believe that there's only one person for a role. It's a coalescence, it's a synergy, right? So the role is written and the person who inhabits it isn't a complete chameleon. They have to bring some of themselves. So it becomes this mesh of like what the idea behind the character is and what the person who does it can bring. So that's one element of it. And the other element is that it's timing and luck and a million different things that come
yeah.
together to make that happen. And that is impossible to formulate and bottle. And I have been lucky enough to experience that. And I know lots of actors who deserve those chances. And whether it happens to them is never down to them. It's sort of down to like whether, the stars align. And for example, I one of my big breaks, really, which isn't really a break but it's an interesting thing that happened in the industry, was that I was cast in one of the episodes of His Dark Materials in the second series. There was a standalone episode with James McAvoy, Terence Stamp, and myself, and I was cast as a supporting role in it, alongside basically a four-hander between myself, James, Terence, and this kid, amazing kid called Ursa McDougal. And that for me was like, I've made it. I've proved to a casting director and producers and things that I can hold down a role that's important and go through dramatic shifts and do it alongside other great actors. And this is me getting to act.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, this is something where people will ask me about it. I'll get press. People will know me outside of the industry. It can lead to more work. We started shooting. We did 10 days of shooting. COVID hit. They shut down production. I went home, and 3 weeks later, the producer called me up and was like, "We're not going to finish the episode. We've got it was a
No.
standalone episode, and we have 7 episodes that follow the book's plot. And this was a sort of new thing that Philip Pullman, the writer, and Jack Thorne had written together to answer some questions that weren't in the book. But the series works without it. BBC doesn't want to lose their transmission date. And it was done. And that for me, it was like,
Oh my
through no
God.
through no fault of my own, this thing that could have been my break was taken from me. But it made me realize that like it's not me. It's
Yeah.
not me that did it, and whether I'm a good actor or not is completely irrelevant sometimes, because it's just about how the stars align.
Yeah.
And so, with the acting thing, I definitely think that I think the reason it took a long time for me to get going is because why would you entertain the CV of a person who didn't train, who's a little bit older, who might not, who on paper can't do what a trained actor can do? I'm sure that there are lots of things I was put up for were put aside, but I get protected from that by my agents. And I'm sure I'm sure I wasn't put up for a lot of things that I would have nailed, but it just wasn't the right thing. Just
Yeah.
no one thought I could do it. It's such a strange process.
There's
It's
so
really
much fiction involved.
absolutely, yeah,
It's just, I tell actors all the time. A million good things can happen to someone for no reason, and that's just the business, and the only thing you can do is keep doing good work, you know?
yeah. I mean, I do. I never went to drama school, so I am technically untrained as an actor. And there's a big, there's a trait of British actors. I think they're quite well respected because of our drama school training and because of our love of theatre. And I think there's an assumption that British actors have that, and I don't have that. But what I do have is a relatively unique lived experience
Yeah.
in my life and my upbringing and what I can do and what cultural, I mean, the thing with Willow is I tried to make it my own as much as I could, and I knew that I was stepping into the feet of essentially Val Kilmer, who,
How did it come your way? Can we talk about that? Like, how
yeah,
did Will? Yeah.
it came in as there's a casting director called Lauren Evans, who is an amazing casting director. She had cast me in this one tiny scene in Sex Education, and she'd also cast me in um, His Dark Materials. You know,
Wow.
she had known of me, and that's an incredibly valuable career connection that I'd made, and she advocated for me, and I think she sent the tape my way, and they loved what I did, and they uploaded it. I think she told me it was the first tape they uploaded out of like the thousands of people they auditioned, and that was October 2020, and then it was a 6 month audition process till I got cast in March 2021. And it was very late.
Before COVID? Oh, this was yeah, okay. Got it.
Yeah, it's
Got it.
the year
Yeah.
after. It was a
Yeah.
late casting, and I think John Kasdan, our showrunner, has gone on record as saying that ultimately he loved me, but I was just way too skinny, and I needed to be this bulk behemoth guy for this role. And I remember saying, you know, I will make myself as big as like that is easy for me.
Yeah.
Proving I can do this is hard, but I will eat rice and chicken and pick things up over and over again to get big to inhabit the role. But I can do this, and I will make this my own, and I will work 1,000 times harder than any other actor who you might cast who might be white, because I have so much more to prove with
Yeah.
this role. Like if I screw this up, I screw it up not just for me, but for other South Asian actors who could possibly step into this role. Like I was so committed to wanting to do this, and you know, it was an interesting casting process. I did multiple tapes, a couple of chemistry reads, lots of meetings. I think it got to a point where it was like I can do the job, and I can work well with the production. It's, you know, it's just a physical thing at this point, and it's not really my fault. And there's all these things. Again, it's you know, you can't really bottle how it works out, but I managed to convince them in the end that it was me. And I mean, the funny thing about it is, I felt like I was stepping into this role, this established role that you know Val Kilmer did in the original film, and I'm not playing him, but every fantasy archetype, every fantasy genre needs that archetype,
Totally.
and I knew I could do it because my childhood was you know, was formulated by Princess Bride and Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and Mirror Mask and Neil Gaiman books and, you know, Monty Python and The Goons and like crazy surreal comedy and action and Jurassic Park, Spielberg. Like that was my childhood, and I was like, I have this knowledge and these references that I need to pick and choose from have been percolating through my system. They're my learned research that I've inhabited. This is like, I can do this. I just need to refine this performance and make that my own, and not pay attention to trying to copy anything. And so again, it's that lived experience and what you've chosen to immerse yourself in, and it will get to a point, hopefully, in my career where I'm asked to do much more difficult things that I have to work harder to do. You know, like I'll
Yeah.
hope the role will come my way, and I'll have to be like, okay, I need to just knuckle down and study to really know how I'm going to inhabit this character. Um, and those come with proving myself in other ways. So I've proved myself in this way, hopefully, with Willow, and now someone will be like, "Do you think you could maybe try this?" And we think you would work for this. And now I think it's a battle for me to stay outside of my box, you know,
Yeah.
to prove. And that's why straight after Willow wrapped, I went to do Gareth's movie, and then straight after that, I did a rom com, sort of like a weird
The
comedy.
15 Love.
This was called Slip. This is with
Oh,
Zoe.
okay. Got it. Got it.
Mm.
Okay.
And, you know, Gareth's movie was just this ginormous sci-fi epic, and it was dramatic. It wasn't comedic, and I was going to play sinister characters and interesting characters. You know, it was new to me after having done Willow, and I was like, if Willow comes out, people are going to want to see what I can do. Feels far enough away from that. I
Yeah.
got to. And then, you know, with Slip, I was really excited to work with Zoe. She's incredible. We'd met in LA at dinner once with mutual friends, and then she sent this my way, and I got to play this sort of like kind of cocky fantasy guy. And again, for me, I was like, you know, Asian men don't get to often be this attractive dude in a rom com. And whether I think of myself attractive or not, it was more like it's a role here where I get to play and be a bit more, to embrace this side of me that's seen as like charming and
Yeah.
you know, fantastical. And I've never done that, and I haven't seen that much, and that seems like it's worthy of doing. And then with 15 Love, it's again, it's not a huge part of the show, but it was immersed in the real world. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I've done Pirate Thief Man, I've done sci-fi epic, I've done rom-com with a twist. Now I should do something that's just real life drama. So at every turn, I'm trying to push myself to do something that feels like it's completely new, so that I can hopefully build this roster of work that still keeps me as a comedian or a character actor, because
Well,
that's really what I'm interested in.
you're doing an outstanding job, and it's incredible. And I'm really curious, especially now that you have these incredible credits. You did Willow and got to be this badass leading man. What do you want to do now? I mean, is American project starting to come your way, or what's
Mm.
What's the
Well,
status?
I'm going to Rome in January to start a Netflix show called The Decameron,
Amazing.
which is just
Congratulations.
thank you, yeah, and that's going to be so much fun. It's basically like 10 noble aristocrats in this sort of like class war hiding
Period
away.
period piece or
Yeah,
contemporary?
yeah, it's
Okay.
set during the plague in Italy, and it's basically a bunch of nobles escape, but then there's a sort of class uprising. But it's an ensemble comedy with incredible Tony Hale's in it, Zozia Mehmet, like
Wow.
Karen Gill, who was in I May Destroy You, Tanya
Yeah.
Reynolds from Sex Education. It's got a really incredible cast. Saoirse Monica Jackson from Derry Girls. It's got this incredible cast of like tried and tested comedy, dramatic performers. So I'm absolutely terrified. But with
You're gonna
it's
crush it, man. Don't even.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have to believe I have to separate myself from that and just focus on what my character's doing. But it's a bit of a I'm sort of a little bit out of my comfort zone with it. I'm playing another sort of like relatively cocky, charming character who's a bit of a sort of an aesthetically pleasing role and in amongst these other characters, but he's quite flawed, and I like playing flawed characters. He's not perfect, and it's going to be a struggle. But again, it's pushing the envelope. It's new. It's and you know, I think after that, I would love to just do something more singular character based, like an
Yeah.
indie film of some sort, where I get to really explore being one character who has to go through multiple emotions and emotional states because you know well I think it's probably in terms of method and my process and these things I just feel like I have this ability to emote on screen at a very basic level that people have identified, and I don't really know how to define that as a process, but I seem to have the instincts to do it, and I just want to refine that as much as possible and test that by playing characters where I don't have to just be one note and where I can move through emotional states, and that is what is interesting to me about performance and acting is being someone on screen that an audience gets to watch and feel what they're feeling without them having to necessarily say anything. And that's a complicated line to toe because you can't be overly performative because then it feels unreal, but
Yeah.
you can't be too real because a lot of the time we don't play emotion on our faces. You know, we say things, and so I that's what really excites me is using your body as a tool to emote. Really, is how I see acting.
Well, that's so beautiful, and I totally agree with everything you just said, and I'm really excited for all these wonderful things coming. And few final questions here. Obviously, you had this incredible directing career. Is that something you see coming back and maybe doing a feature? Of whether you're in it or not. Is that an impulse?
Absolutely. I'm actually writing a movie right now with a friend of mine who's a director from back in my directing days, who's incredibly talented, and that's going to be this amazing sort of period. Hopefully, if it all comes together, First World War period. So I'm writing that with him and producing, and I will be in it. So
Amazing.
that's me being behind the camera again, and hopefully telling a story that no one's seen before. I'm also trying to write a movie as well that would be a vehicle for me, just because I think it'd be a good thing to do.
You have
Um,
to. It's what I'm
yeah,
doing too.
yeah,
That's the only control we have.
you got to write what you know, right, and
Yeah, yeah.
write what you think you can do well. And so you know that's a healthy practice to do. But I love directing. I love being back behind the camera, and there's a thrill that comes from crafting something with so many like you know so many moving parts, you know, so many technically visual things and human things that you have to orchestrate, and then it sort of this ginormous thing gets concentrated down onto a 2D screen,
Yeah.
and it's responsible for making you feel stuff. There's a huge thrill to doing that, and I want to 100% refine that and go back to it because I think I am a good director. I found myself doing stuff that I wasn't comfortable with, and this felt like a way to amplify who I was to the world as much as I loathe to say it, a brand, but
Yeah.
it's more just like, you know, I can tell stories as a collaborator, whether I'm helping perform them or whether I'm writing them or whether I'm directing them, and I have to build myself up in that way, and I've done it via acting. But absolutely, absolutely, want to get back behind the camera.
Oh man, well you're on this righteous path and I'm proud of you and I hope, one day we get a chance to work together because you're doing incredible work and I love your vision for and the manifestation of all the things that you're making happen.
Mm.
Which brings me to my final question and I have so much respect for how you've been able to manifest everything. But for those actors out there, not just the British ones, but
Mhm.
that didn't get a chance or perhaps can't afford, an amazing drama school, and but do have
Sure.
these incredible life experiences and have a lot to offer, but they're having a hard time getting taken seriously by the business. Any
Mhm.
words of wisdom you might have for them?
Create, make as much as you can. I mean, we live in a world now where you can make relatively attractive and good looking things on your phone. And a lot of us are lucky enough to have access to that. I know it's hard because film requires equipment, but all I've ever done is make stuff to refine how, and a lot of it's been terrible. And that's the beauty of creating things, is that they're going to be, some of them are going to be terrible and some of them are going to be good. There are very few auteurs out there who just have a constant hit record of perfection, and I'm sure they have things that they would never show the world. But make stuff, and if you want to be an actor, the best thing that made the thing that made me a better actor was being a director. It gave me all this technical knowledge behind the camera and how a film set and a TV set works, and that is essential to knowing how to be an actor, because there's no real guidance in that way. You have to learn that. So pick up a camera, write stuff that shoot it, learn to edit it, learn how your performance can be crafted, and largely you can do that by yourself, even if it's just for you. It's amazing how you can sit there for like 6 months and just wait for the right part to come along. But
Yeah.
if in that 6 months, you know, write a part for yourself that you like, or make, routes to people who also like to write and direct, and offer yourself as a resource to be in stuff. Chase the ability to do it if you can in any way, shape, or form, or get friends together and other actors that and just act with them. I remember in lockdown there was we were very starved of the ability to work because it's such a desperate thing. And then a great actor, a friend of mine called Ed Pigner, who lives in Toronto now, but he and Bessie Carter, who's in Bridgerton,
Hmm.
another friend of mine, Joe Bannister, basically a bunch of us all got thrown into a WhatsApp group, and there was a play called Constellations. Um,
Nick Payne, one of my
Nick
favorite
Payne, yeah.
writers.
And we
Yeah.
decided to just make that play as a Zoom call. So we divided all the scenes up
I saw
into,
that. I holy shit! I saw that. That's incredible work, man. I
yeah,
love that piece. I saw Jake
it's
do it.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Oh, that was an amazing performance. I mean,
Yeah.
we never actually released ours into the public, and we should probably put it out there. It's been so long now, but the very practice of doing it was incredible, and it was free for us. Obviously, you have to be lucky enough to have access to Zoom and a computer if you have all those things. But we were picking up plays, and that play has two people in it, and so
It's
we
so
basically
many juicy different universes,
exactly.
circumstances,
And
million
so
ways you could play it, you know?
yeah, so I
Yeah.
think we had like 20 pairs of people, and each pair was, and I was paired with another male actor, and it didn't really matter what your gender was or anything. It was just like, I can't remember the characters now. One is I can't remember what they're called. God, it's been so long. But yeah, one is a man, one is a woman. But it didn't really matter. It was just like, here's one person, here's one person.
Yeah.
You're living this experience, and there's multiple timelines, and you get four of these scenes. Everyone gets four of the scenes of this play, and then you meet your
Mm,
person, you get on Zoom, and you just fucking act. And it's Zoom. It's like theater. You don't get to edit it. You just have to
yeah.
nail that scene, and then we threw all that into an edit and edited it together, and it's this weird piece. It's probably not very pacey because it's on Zoom and it's a bit boring, but it was a reason for us to do our jobs. And it's that, it's like it's working, it's putting yourself out there and finding ways that you can work, because it means you're refining your abilities and you're refining your style and who you are as an actor, and you're not hedging all of that on just one audition.
Yeah.
And then any of that might get noticed. Any one of those things might be an inroad to somebody else who could work with you or could help you do this. Or it's a creative industry, and we should think of ourselves as extensions of this network of
Wow.
people. Yeah, to just make stuff if you can. Yeah, that's my advice.
Beautiful interview, man. Thank you for opening up and telling me about your journey and everyone and all the wonderful nuggets of wisdom you dropped. And I'm really excited for you. And dude, you get to go to Rome. I hope you have the best time. And if you're ever in New York City, look me up. Let's grab a cup of coffee and let's get a project going.
I love coffee and I love New York, so
Yeah.
I will be doing that if I can get there.
Come visit me and hey, come back when the other projects come out. I'm really proud of you, brother. You're doing so much excellent work and you're just getting started. So keep
Thank you.
going, man. I'm sincerely very proud of you.
That means a lot. It really means a lot.